Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Yom Teruah, the preparation for the Day of Atonement. I'm excited to be here with you another night. We began last night at even, so today is actually Yom Teruah, but it goes from even to evening. You know, the word says the evening and the morning were the first day, so even to even is a day, and so we're here for the finalization of this holy time, of this set apart time, of this moed of Yah, this appointment that he's calling all of his sons to come into in this season, so that we can begin to realize the blessing of the Lord that makes rich and adds no sorrow, so that we can begin to be the people that would show forth the praises of his glory to the entire world. That's always been his objectivity. That's always been his point of view concerning his sons. It's always been his desire, his mode of operation, the way that he wants to do a thing. He wants to set his people in a place that is high, so that the world can see his goodness and begin to come to him and to ask, what must I do to be in this position that you're in? How do I achieve what you've achieved? Instead, we live in a world where people do a lot of bragging about their degrees and all of these other things. You know, we brag about everything, but I'm telling you right now, what the Father's desire is to give us a place that we could not have achieved on our own, simply because we are obedient, simply because we honor him, simply because we consider him, and the depth of the relationship is a priority to us. And that being a priority, we are not in a position where we can forget his benefits. The benefits go along with the relational package. You understand what I'm saying? But it costs something. It costs something. It costs being separated, you know? It costs being set apart. And a lot of people like to say separate and set apart, but they like to do same. They like to do what they see everybody else doing. So we have to be very mindful that we are not following the rudiments of this world, that we are not just doing as they do. Now, that's a lot of things that people would consider rudiments of the world, but that doesn't necessarily make them rudiments. What separates the difference between what the world does? Because there are a lot of things that we do similar. We get up every morning, we wash up. So would I call that a rudiment of the world? No. You know, some of us may dress in certain attire for work. Would I call that a rudiment of the world? If you have a uniform, no, that's not a rudiment of the world. So we're not grouping everything together. That's not what the Father does. He's a just Father, okay? But there are things that put us in a position where there is no separation. So anything that would make you see, the thing about it is that the thing is not what makes you um, following the world. The thing is not what makes you do that. It's the spirit of how you function that makes you either one that is following the world system or doing what the king requires, right? And so the separation happens in the spirit. It doesn't just happen because of what you have on, because we can both have on the same shirt, but not be operating in the same spirit. We could have even gone to the same store and purchased the same, you know, face wash or the same shoes or whatever, but the spirit of the persons be different. So there are a lot of little intricate details about these things that people like to kind of all make a one size fits all. And that's not what it is. It's not a one size fits all situation. It operates, all of these things are operations of the spirit. And it is the spirit that causes people to understand where the delineation, the line of delineation is, where the separation begins, right? And so we began to talk yesterday about Yom Teruah. That's where we are right now. This is the preparation for the Day of Atonement, which is going to happen October the 2nd at even through October the 3rd at even. The Day of Atonement is actually the 3rd, but it begins again at even to even, right? So it's sundown to sundown, even to even. And so that's when that is. And we'll talk about that some more, because I want to give you the upcoming days for the feast celebrations. We're right now in Yom Teruah, which is also known as Feast of Trumpets, not necessarily a feast. So I just kind of refer to it as Yom Teruah. And then the Day of Atonement, which is just one day. But then there is after that the Feast of Tabernacles, right? Which comes right after that. And we'll get into that. I want to jump into some things tonight. I'm going to jump into some things. And I began to play the trumpet, the blast of the shofar, because this is the time that we're in. We're in the time of the blast of sound. This is Yom Teruah, I mean, the day of blast, the day of shoutings, the day of sound, the day of trumpets, okay? The day of making sound. And so that's where we are right now. I want to jump into some reading as we get some things underway. And I don't know how far we're going to be able to go today, but I wanted to jump on before sundown, because sundown to sundown is the actual time of Yom Teruah. So I wanted to get on. I was going to do it at 9 o'clock, but that doesn't make sense because that's the end of Yom Teruah. I wanted to do it right here while we were in it. So let's look at a couple of things really quickly. I want you to go to Exodus chapter 19, verse 5. And now, therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed. And we want to just kind of talk about obedience for a minute, because the reason why we are doing this is because of obedience to the statutes, to the desire of Yah. These are his purposes that we are fulfilling when we are following what he has ordained, what he has instituted. Okay. And so I want to start out with reading this, because yesterday we talked a little bit about the fact that the Father has instituted these things, and that we kind of lean a little bit more towards man than we do towards him. And so we're following different things, and we may get into just briefly the gods of the holidays. I'll probably just do Easter tonight, but I'm encouraging you to go and study further. But we're going to get into some things tonight, but I want to establish this as a foundation for what the Father is speaking to us, for where his heart is, because this is his words to the children of Israel as he has brought them out of their captivity. And we all want to be out of our captivity. We all want to walk in this place of promise. We all want to get to our promised destinations and all of that. But there are some things that have to happen in the midst of those things. And the first thing that we have to do is just receive what he's saying. We have to not only receive what he's saying, what his law, what his statutes, what his covenant is, because that's what he makes when he brings the children of Israel out of Egypt. And one of the very first things that happens is he begins to make covenant with them. And we're going to talk a little bit in depth about that, but let's get this reading underway. Exodus chapter 19, verse 5. If you're on and I'm missing you, no worries. I'm just, I'm busy reading. So I'll catch the comments when I come back, if there are any comments. Okay. So here we are. Now, therefore, if you will obey my voice, this is crucial right here, and obey my voice indeed, okay, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. Are you listening to that? And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. This is the Father having a conversation with Moshe. This is what I want you to say to them. And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which Yah commanded him. And all the people answered together, here we go, all that the Father has spoken, all that Yah has spoken, we will do. And Moshe returned the words of the people unto the Father. And Yah said unto Moshe, lo, I come unto thee in the thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee. In other words, they're not going to see me, but they're going to hear me, that they may hear me and believe thee forever. And Moshe told the words of the people unto Yah. And what I love about what he does here, what the Father does here, is that he says, I'm going to give evidence, right? And so when I share with you some things, when I'm sharing with you the things that I'm sharing with you regarding how, since the deepening of the relationship based on the obedience and the adherence to these very specific things that the Father has spoken to us in his word, like the Sabbaths and the Moedim, which are the appointed times of Yah. Since that time, these are evidences. Since that time, one of the things that has caused me to become who I am on the level that up to this point is the fact that I came into covenant with him regarding the things that he's concerned about. And so one of the things that I like about that passage in Exodus 19 is that the Father begins to establish evidences. And I believe that we're in the season of great evidences. The Father's going to begin to release great evidences of what he's been speaking. He's going to begin to release great evidences of the sons whose hand he is on, whose hands, whom he has his hands on. They're going to be great evidences of these things, not just because people can speak well, not just because we know how to put all of the words together, because I'm finding in this season, although there are seasons where, I'm known for having conversations that are eloquent and all of that good stuff, but that's not my focus in the season. And sometimes I almost feel kind of dumb because of how the Father uses me. I almost feel kind of not fully all that I've been but it's a purpose behind it, because he's saying, listen, I don't want you to get stuck in your eloquence. I don't want you to get stuck in your ability to use words. I'm going to still allow you to use words, and there's going to still be a grace on your life for certain things and in these certain areas. However, there are times when he releases what he releases, and it just makes you feel dumb. And so you have to come to terms with, you know what, this is what he's doing. This is the Father's doing. And it's marvelous to me, because the point is not that you see me for the eloquent speaker that I am, but the point is that you see me for the glory and for the grace and for the favor that is on my life, not just in the ability to speak, but in the ability to fruit. You understand what I'm saying? And so I believe that we're in a season of great evidences, that the Father is beginning to put before us great evidences through his Son, some things that he's going to begin to show forth through our hands, through our lives, through the things that he's called us to. And they're going to be great evidences of who he is towards his Son. So I love that about what he's done and what he is doing, right? These appointments of Yah are for the purpose of people being reintroduced. This is, I believe, why he has these appointments throughout the year, is so that, you know, you might have not understood anything about this. You may have never been introduced, but at one of these times, you're going to hear the voice of a son that's going to begin to share, whether it's at Passover, whether it's at Shavuot, whether it's at Sukkot, which is coming up, whether it's at Feast of Tabernacles, whatever it is, you're going to begin to hear in some time, in some season, that the Father's heart is in these places, and that he desires you to meet him in these places. And so I believe that these appointments of Yah are for the purpose of people being reintroduced to the perfect way of Yah, in coming into obedience to his statutes, to his loving instructions, right? Father takes issue with man's rebellion and transgressing his way. He takes issue. I'm going to give you just a little bit of fruit, a little bit of proof of the fact that he takes issue with the rebellion of sons. You know, he's called us out of darkness into marvelous light. He desires for us to be in this posture, in this position of blessing, not just for us, but the purpose of the covenant is so that the earth might receive, so that all nations would receive. He says, listen to Abraham. He said, I'm going to make you a blessing that I might establish my covenant. You understand? It's not just about you. It's about those who are connected to you, those who will come out of you, those who will follow after you. But the Father takes issue with rebellion. And over and over and over in Scripture, there is the proof that he takes issue with rebellion. The whole book of Judges is about the children of Israel rebelling, the Hebrew children rebelling, and then a new judge rises. And after that judge dies, while the judge is alive, they're following the instructions and the statutes of Yah. And when that judge dies, they go right back to doing as they please. You understand what I'm saying? He sent the prophets to begin to make the correction in the sons. And all during this time, there were things, had they done these specific things, this is just what the Father is hot off the press. The truth of the matter is, had they followed the specific instructions of Yah to follow after Sabbaths and to keep the feasts, it would have been very difficult if they had these things in their heart to go away, to veer off of the path. These things are things that reset us. They reestablish us in the faith. They reestablish us in the thing, because the Father's desire during those feast times, during those times of appointment, is to begin to download in us what we need for every season. And so we can acknowledge, and we know that the way that they were doing things was not the way that he desired. As a matter of fact, he's giving me proof, and I'm going to read Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 2 through 4 in just a moment, to give you proof that he has a problem with man rebelling against his statutes. He has a problem with sons, particularly rebelling against his statutes. But the thing is that what happened here, I don't even remember what I was going to say. I was going to talk about the statutes. But if somebody's on, you can tell me what I was just about to say, because I completely forgot what I was about to say about the sons. The thing with the statutes is that his desire is that we be in alignment with what he's called us to. And when we're out of alignment, it's so easy. Oh, I know what I was talking about. The children of Israel, had they been following the statutes, and I was going to give you proof that they failed to follow it, because he says this in the scripture. He says, I am sick of, I loathe your feasts and your fasts. He said, this thing, you've turned this into something about you. It's no longer about me. It's no longer about what I want. It's about what you want. So these things now have been turned into your feasts. He turns around and said, these are your feasts. In other words, you're not following what I said. You're not doing what I uh, ordained for you to do. You're not doing what I established. Now you're doing your own thing. And this is how they got all off into the different holidays, man-made things. This is not a new thing. Holidays is not a new thing. Man making holidays for people to follow, it's not a new thing. This has been going on. If we look back all the way to Jeroboam, and I'm going to talk about him in a minute, he created his own holidays. He was the one that instituted this setup of religion outside of Nimrod. Nimrod was the first to create religion outside of relationship. He's the one that has instituted religion, but Jeroboam took it to the next level. You understand what I'm saying? And so that they were not following what the Father ordained. They were not following what he instituted. And the reason why you notice is because he says, I loathe it. I loathe what you have established. I loathe your feast days. I'm going to see if I can pull it up real quick. Your feast days and your Sabbaths. He said, I don't like this. And it's in the same chapter where he says, is this the fast that I've called for? Is this the fast that I've chosen? You remember that verse? Is this the fast that I have chosen? It's in the book of Isaiah, I believe 58. Yeah. Isaiah 58. You will find that same conversation he's having with the children of Israel in Isaiah 58, where he says, this is not my stuff. I loathe this. I don't like what you're doing. Keep them. Keep these fast days. Keep your solemn feasts. You understand what I'm saying? Keep your solemn feasts, because this ain't got nothing to do with me anymore. And so look at here, Zephaniah. I want to tell you that the Father takes issue with sons' rebellion and transgressing his way. Well, what is his way? His way has been established. His way is built into the covenant that he created. His desires for us to identify with the Sabbaths and the feasts. These are his appointments. And it's funny that we can identify with all of these man-made appointments, but then we have a problem saying, oh, well, it's too much. Oh, well, that's over the top. Oh, well, this is that. But you will take months before, you'll prepare months before a season, just so you can make sure that everything is in place. And so we've got to be mindful, and we've got to be careful that while we are in this journey, that we are being mindful of what the Father's desire is. I talked about it yesterday. We're very conscious and very excited about him being concerned about everything that concerns us. But the question really is, are we concerned about what he is concerned about? That's a real question. Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 2, it says, she obeyed not the voice. Talking about Israel, talking about the children of Israel. She obeyed not the voice. She received not correction. She trusted not in Yah. She drew not near to him. Her princes within her are roaring lions. Her judges are evening wolves. They grow not the bones. They gnaw not the bones till the morrow. Okay. Her prophets are light and treacherous persons. Her priests have polluted the sanctuary. Listen to this. They have polluted the sanctuary, and they have done violence to the law. They've done violence to what the Father said. They're no longer promulgating his desire towards the people. They're promulgating their own desire. What it is that they are saying is going to be accurate, for people to live the right life, to live their best life. Oh, these are the things. If you do this, if you go to church every Sunday, if you come to Bible study, if you give your tithes, if you give your offerings, you know what? You can do all of that and still miss the kingdom. You can do all of that and still at the end of the day, there be a conversation, I never knew you. You know why? Because it's about the relationship. It's not about the ritual. It's about the relationship. And if there's the only way to have relationship is for people to have dynamic conversations that share their position, and for the other person to accept the position of the other person, right? And in accepting the position of the other person, they are able to commune. They're able to connect because they have accepted the conversation, right? They understand that the conversation connects them. They're willing to commit based on this conversation, right? There will always be a king thing. I call them king things. What are king things? These are the things that are optimally operating in their authenticity. These are the things that in the case of diabolic nature, they're optimal in their operations to deceive, to cause men, or to give a reason for deviation. They can't make you deviate, but they will give you a reason for deviation, give you good cause to deviate, present a good picture that would make you deviate. It plays its part to its own benefit in hopes to cause the stumbling of the ignorant and the prideful. The most convenient persons that are choices here for the king thing to actually push its agenda are ignorance and pride. Ignorance and pride put us in positions to be sitting ducks for the king thing. You understand what I'm saying? The Bible talks about that the adversary roams to and fro, Satan roaming to and fro, seeking whom he may devour. In other words, he can't devour everybody, but he's seeking whom he may devour. He's seeking those that may be ignorant. And ignorance is not a bad word. It just means there's something that you don't know. But then there's prideful. And those are people that do know something. They're just not willing to adhere, right? And so there will always be a king thing that attempts to give the alternative to the way of Yah. We saw it in the garden, right? That thing was there. It optimally was operating in its nature. Okay, in its foundational nature. No, it didn't have dominion, but it had authority over its operations. And so it optimally operated in its operations to deceive. And it was successful in the deception because ignorance and pride was a factor in the garden. Eve might have been completely ignorant because she wasn't the one having the conversation. Although, we believe that Adam should have had that conversation with her, but it never states that he had the conversation with her. But pride was definitely a factor. Okay, because what happens when this thing all comes to a head is that Adam begins to point the finger instead of taking responsibility. That's a form of pride. Pointing the finger instead of taking responsibility is a form of pride, right? But there'll always be a king thing. Let me give you an example of the king thing. King Jeroboam, right? He was one of Israel's most wicked kings, and I am mentioning him for a purpose. You'll find out the purpose here shortly because I mentioned him at the beginning, right? Jeroboam was one of Israel's most wicked kings. I think Ahab took it to the next level, and the thing that made Ahab the most wicked was the fact that he not only was wicked, but he married into wickedness. He got a partner that helped him, right? That his help meet, the one that helped him meet his wicked obligation was Jezebel. So this king founded, Jeroboam is who I'm speaking of, founded a new religion for the kingdom. He made 2 golden calves and built altars in Bethel and in Dan and placed one of the golden calves in Bethel and the other one in Dan. He further diverted the children of Israel's attention and devotion from Yah, right, from his chosen place of worship, which was Jerusalem, to these golden idols in Dan and Bethel. You can find this in First Kings chapter 12, around verse 31. This sin was later referred to as the sins of Jeroboam, or the way of Jeroboam. So King Jeroboam, in addition to the golden calves, he built high places, right? These are high places for offerings of sacrifices on top of hills. In other words, he exalted the sacrifice. Now, I had really never got a glimpse of what the Father was saying with the whole exalted sacrifice, but he's just dropping something on me now, because before they wasn't doing sacrifices on hills. They were just doing the sacrifice right there, on a level place where the Father had instituted the meeting, the congregation of meeting, right there where the congregation of meeting, which was the tent, was set up for worship. That's where they did sacrifice. Now he wants to exalt the sacrifice, that's a loaded conversation, exalting the sacrifice. We find that happening a lot in religion because we're exalting the sacrifice. If we're fasting, the fast it's an exalted place. But guess what? If it's not the fast he's calling for, then you can exalt the sacrifice all you want to, but it's not something that he's accepting, right? We exalt a lot of different things that we're called to do. We exalt the thing, but we don't exalt him. And so that's a problem. The sacrifice being exalted, what is that? How do we exalt the sacrifice over the one that's asking for the sacrifice? You know what I'm saying? So it puts you in the wrong space in your mind. It puts you in the wrong space in your heart. It puts you in a position almost as if you are the one that is in charge, almost as if you're not under him, right? You're exalted over him. And so these are just some of the things that he did. The golden calves, he built the high places, offering sacrifices on top of hills. He also forsook the tribe of Levi. The Levitical tribe was the tribe that the Father called into the priesthood, right? But he forsook that, and he ordained ordinary people as priests of the high places for the shrines. Listen to this: for the shrines, the altar and the golden calves. Those were the shrines, the altar and the golden calves. And we know that those shrines, we got all kinds of things as it pertains to the shrines. Even when you get into Acts, you see Diana, the shrine of Diana, and all. And now if you look up shrines, you'll see all these different kind of shrines for all kinds of gods and all kinds of people, right? So he's the one that instituted that thing, right? In Bethel and in Dan. Once again, instead of people coming to Jerusalem or going to Jerusalem to follow what the Father's prescribed method of worship was, he was diverting them and not only creating other gods for them to worship, but another place for them to worship, another position, another posture of worship, right? He also ordained a feast in the 15th day of the 8th month. Now, why that's a big deal is because we're right here in this 7th month feast. Okay, this is the feast that the Father has called for. This is the feast that he called for. Hi, baby girl. This is the feast that he called for. And it begins with YOM, which is the blowing of trumpets, which is the day of sounding, the day of shout, and the day of the sound of the trumpet, right? So he instituted this time in the 7th month, the first day, which we're doing now, and then the 9th day, which is going to be October 2nd and 3rd from even to even. And then you come down to the Feast of Tabernacles, right? And the Feast of Tabernacles is found, that'll be this October, it'll be the 8th through the 15th. That's the 15th day of the month, okay? And you can find all of this in Leviticus chapter 23, right? So King Jeroboam was the king thing. He set up and established all these other things. And why am I bringing him up? Because this is the purpose or the reason that a lot of people are diverted to doing other things. Remember, I told you yesterday, if you're in a house that's not teaching you what the Father's statutes are, they are omitting the statutes, they're omitting law, they're omitting all of that. See, now the master came to establish the way that we could make sure that we are following every jot and every tittle. And that would be to love the Father with all our heart, mind, and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves. But the love of the Father means that we adhere to what he said. And that's what the master came to show us. He said, listen, he not only gives me what to say, but what to speak. In other words, what to say in a moment and what to continue to speak. I don't do this on my own accord. I get from him what to both say and speak. And so because he's concerned about what the Father wants to say, because he's concerned about what the Father wants to speak, he's concerned about what the Father wants to do, because that's all he's going to do is what the Father has already established. And so we find the Mashiach, even in what you guys consider the New Testament, following the feast days. Now, a lot of people want to say, oh, I'm a Christian, and they call that Christ-like or whatever. Okay. Let's just use that perspective, right? If you are Christ-like, since that's what you're calling him, then why wouldn't you do like him, right? Because that was the purpose of the Mashiach coming. That was the purpose for his very existence, as it is the purpose of your existence, for you to follow the way that he prepared, follow the way that he showed you, because this is the way to the Father. This is the way to right standing, to right relationship, and this is the way that you're going to show to others to get to the Father. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So this is it's a simple thing, and man has taken it and turned it into something else. Man has taken it and created their own golden calves. They've created their own place of worship, their own way to worship. They created not only that, but they created the times of worship, right? And said, this is the Lord's day, right? This is what the Catholic Church did. They call Sunday the Lord's Day. Well, that's a whole another story in and of itself. But if you do the study of the history of the Lord's Day, you'll understand that that doesn't mean that is Yah's day. Every day belongs to Yah. But there are specific times that he calls for us, right, to come into divine fellowship with him so that he can drop on us what he needs to drop onto us. Now, the thing about it is, the day I was telling you where I was kind of confused if I had missed something, that was the Sabbath day. And had I been busy on the Sabbath, had I been doing a bunch of other things, I would not have had that time of resting to realize I didn't miss it. It's upon me. I didn't miss it. I'm right here at it. But had I been busy, I wouldn't have realized it. And I could have potentially missed something that I've been doing all this time. But like I told you, once you set a thing in motion and you continuously practice this, continuously rehearse that, sometimes, regardless of whether you're thinking about it or not, it becomes just a thing that's a program in you. It's like when you're hearing music. Music is so powerful. You could be hearing something and not even be adhering to it, but in a moment you'll hear the song lyrics of something come up. Why? Because you kept hearing it in the store while you were shopping or whatever. Not anything that you actually physically pulled up to listen to, but because you kept repetitively hearing this, now it's something that's in your spirit. Well, what happens when we repetitively, intentionally follow the statutes of Yah, that even when we are distracted, even when there's something else going on, that alarm rings in us because it's keeping us in alignment. There's an alarm in us that keeps us in alignment with what the Father is saying, both saying and doing. You know, this is why I'm able to be here tonight. You know, regardless of the numbers, regardless of whatever is going on, that doesn't matter. Yeah, yesterday was a busier time. The time before that, it was busier. But guess what? A lot of people don't want to hear things about what the Father's calling us to. They want to make up what he's called them to. They want to just kind of make it up as they go along. Like if I could just make it up as I go along, then I'm good. But that's where it comes to the fact that people make up their own gods. They make up their own thing to worship. They make up their own way to worship. It's the way of Jeroboam. You know, that is a forefather for wickedness, just like Nimrod. He was a forefather of religion. Okay. And so when we adhere to that way of serving, when we adhere and practice that way of serving, that's how we get into all of these debauchery places, all these places of debauchery. That's how we wind up in all these ridiculous places, because we have created our own scenario, our own situation, and we have not adhered to the simple things that the Father is saying. You know what? The truth of the matter is that if we adhere to what he's saying, you remember one of the things that I read at the beginning, it talked about making a peculiar people. Well, what happens when you're peculiar? People look at you differently. What happens when you're peculiar? Everything can't connect to you because you're peculiar. It's funny, he gave me a word this morning, and I shared it with a couple of my family members this morning, but it was wild because what he was saying to me was, I don't want you to water yourself down. I don't want you to water yourself down, and I don't want you to feel some kind of way about what I'm creating in you. This is what he said. I'm going to tell you what he said because it was such a powerful conversation. I'm waiting for it to come up so that I can share it with you. Such a powerful conversation. He said these two things. Let me pull it up for you. He said this: don't change the depth of your waters because others refuse to learn to swim. I want you to just kind of absorb that for a minute. Don't change the depth of your waters. You know, there are times when we alter who we are just so people won't be rubbed the wrong way. We alter who we are just so people can feel comfortable with where they are, but that's not the way of the master. The way of the master, he doesn't intentionally do this, but he doesn't change who he is. He doesn't change the depth of who he is. He doesn't change the depth of his waters because people are refusing to learn to swim. The people around him have to learn to swim. He is deep. And the sons that he's chosen around him, these disciples, they have to learn of him. They have to learn how to function in this environment, or they have to just go on their way, right? You remember the disciples when he began to talk about the breaking of the body and the eating and the breaking, and this is my body broken for you, and this is my blood. They thought of it as a literal thing. He wasn't saying eat flesh and drink blood. That would be cannibalistic, and that would also be breaking the law of Yah, right? But had they known who he was, they would know, I'm looking at him. He's a keeper of the laws of Yah. He's a keeper of the statutes of his Father. And so I know that's not what he's saying. He's got to be saying something else. The other thing was, don't dilute you for people who prefer Kool-Aid. Listen, don't dilute yourself for people who prefer Kool-Aid and can't stand the strength of the drink that you are. You're a strong drink. If you are following the way of the Father, if you're following the way of Yah, you're a strong drink. You're hard to swallow. Are you hearing what I'm saying? It makes people make that face. You're hard to swallow. You're a strong drink. And to try to dilute yourself is to pacify people who just love Kool-Aid. Are you hearing what I'm saying? We're not doing that in this season. I remember some years ago that the Father said to me, you've been diluted. I promise you, I hate that phrase. Altogether hate that phrase, because the last thing I'm going to be in this season is diluted. I'm going to do exactly what he called me to do, exactly the way that he called me to do it, because the thing that I realized is that I could be chosen of him and not selected by you. Are you hearing what I'm saying? You've got to come to terms with that as a leader of the things of Yah, of the kingdom of Yah, that you can be chosen of Yah and be rejected by men. Do you remember Micaiah? He was the prophet. He was a prophet in that same time of King Ahab, and I think that was Jehoshaphat, King Jehoshaphat, and Ahab wanted to go to war, and Jehoshaphat says, "Is there not another prophet here?" Because all of the prophets of Ahab, were doing their thing. All of the prophets of Ahab were saying just what the king wanted to hear. This wicked king wanted to hear. But at the end of the day, what happened was that Ahab said, "Yeah, there's another prophet, but I hate him." I hear you, cousin. I'm on here. There's another prophet in the land, but I really hate him. And why did he hate? Why did he hate Micaiah? He hated Micaiah because Micaiah wasn't going to sugarcoat it. Micaiah was just going to say what it was, right? And because Micaiah would just say what it was, Ahab hated him. But he had to call upon him. So I'm telling you right now, as a leader, whether you hear this live now or you hear it by replay, as a leader, whether or not the people receive you doesn't denote whether you've been chosen. You can be chosen of Yah, but be rejected by people. But the thing that you have to be steadfast in, the thing that you have to be certain of, is that you've been called and that you're going to adhere to the call, that you're going to answer the call. And in doing that, that's where the blessing of Yah comes from. That's where the blessing resides, and it doesn't reside in people receiving you. Yah's blessing is not predicated on how many people accept what you're saying, how many people receive what you're saying. Yah's blessing is connected to your obedience. Okay, I want you to think about the prophets. Think about the prophets and how he sent them in the midst of these wretched people. They were rebellious. They did not want to do what he said. And many of them hated the prophets. Some of them even killed some of the prophets. Why? Because they didn't want to hear it. They did not only want to not hear it, they didn't want to adhere to it. I told you yesterday, as it pertains to the children of Israel dealing with the Queen Ashtaroth or Easter, this thing that the saints think they have to celebrate Easter. No, it's not that. That's not the conversation about the resurrection. That's not the real thing. That's a whole nother situation. That's a whole nother worship to a whole nother God. And so this thing was even founded in the scripture. They were baking cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and they flat out told Jeremiah, "What you said, we ain't doing that." Now they entertained him on some things. They were like, yeah, we'll do it, whatever. But then they just got to the place where they were so brazen and so prideful and so settled in their way. They were like, "Nah, we heard everything you said. Yeah, we know the history of how things work, but we're not doing that. We're going to continue to bake cakes to the Queen of Heaven." And guess what? Our husbands are right here with us. They're okay in it. And so this takes us back to us being mindful of connection. Okay, because there could be people that you're connected to that are okay with your transgression. They're okay with things not being done the way that the Father has desired them to be done, the way that he designed it to be done. They're okay with that. And you cannot become okay with doing things the way in any other way than what the Father designed it, because you'll get comfortable there. And then when he actually is speaking, because you're so far gone and you've been so gone for so long doing your own thing, doing it your own way. Now, when he's speaking to you to try to bring you back into that place of realization, remember I told you, it's because of the rehearsal of the thing over and over again, that even when I wasn't thinking about it anymore, that the alarm of God went off in me to let me know, no, there's something coming. There's something that's happening, and I don't want you to miss it, because you've been adhering to this. Now the alarm is going to go off, and you're not going to miss it. You set an alarm, and you may set an alarm for a season, but after so long, you're up before the alarm. You know why? Because it's in you now. Your body has become accustomed to this alarm. Everything about you has now become accustomed to the alarm. So now you respond to the alarm in you and before the alarm outside of you even happens. You understand what I'm saying? So King Jeroboam, he was one of the most wicked kings. And we've got to be mindful that we don't establish our own way of worship, that we don't establish our own way to worship him, our own place of worship, that we don't create our own times, our own appointments. You understand what I'm saying? These things are serious to the Father. I was telling you yesterday. Yes, it's a beautiful thing for him to be concerned about everything that concerns us. But the question he is posing in this season of transition, the question he's posing in this opening, in this door, in this window of opportunity is, are you concerned about what he's concerned about? Because that's the real question. He's going to be concerned about what concerns us. That's why with loving kindness, he draws us. Yes, but everybody has a breaking point. Even Yah has a breaking point. Did you know that? You know you have a breaking point because you're only going to be rejected for so long before you say, okay, no more of this. And so we just think that the Father is different. if you read the scripture, you will see that he has a point where he's like, okay, no more of this. I mentioned it yesterday when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, and he said, you have transgressed me these 10 times in the wilderness. He didn't say it at the first time. He didn't say, you know what, you didn't cross me once, you won't get to cross me no more. He didn't say it the second time. By the 6th time, he didn't say, okay, it's been 6 times you didn't cross me, now you won't get a 7th. No, at 10 times he said, okay, that you've reached a point now. Now you've reached a point, and all the things that you have declared, all the things that you have said, oh, I brought you out into the wilderness for you to die. Okay, that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to have exactly what you say. Okay, so while we're there on this topic of the Father despising and hating the fact that we would declare our own way, right? I want to say this because yesterday I made a point and I wanted to give you at least one scripture for it. You can go and find a plethora of scriptures for it. But while we're on the topic of Jeroboam and the debauchery that he created and how he set up and instituted something opposite of the relationship with Yah, the Father does raise up enemies to contend with the disobedience of those whom he chooses. You know, a lot of people have a hard time understanding that. They have a hard time believing that the Father employs darkness. He will employ darkness. Do you hear me? To get you in alignment, he will employ darkness. He will. Now, the enemy thinks he's really doing something, but the thing I love about the Father is that not only will he employ darkness, but he'll fire it and then deal with it. He employed the Egyptians. He employed Egypt to be captors for the sons. They left the promised place to go into a place. Now, you got to remember, Abraham left the promised place and went to Egypt. But when it came to his son, right, when it came to Isaac, he told Isaac, don't leave. I'm gonna sustain you right here. Now I can just imagine that beyond Isaac, after you hear Isaac's testimony, then beyond Isaac, you would know that we don't just leave the promise. We don't just leave the promise behind, but the Father will sustain us when he promises something. If we are adherent and obedient to what his statutes are, to what he's ordained, then he's going to sustain us. This is what he did for Isaac. He said, don't leave. But then the children leave the promised place because you know they was in the land of promise, right? Okay. They leave the promised place to go to Egypt to be sustained. So now they want Egypt to sustain them. And when they get there, because Joseph's in authority, they just get comfortable. They don't go back to promise. They don't get themselves together and go back to promise. They stay in Egypt. And now another king rises, right? And the Father employs that king. He said, it's not that he didn't know the history. When it says he knew not Joseph, it doesn't mean that he didn't know what happened before he got there. He just says, I could care less what Joseph instituted. What I'm counting is too many heads here. I'm counting too many heads on the other side of the fence. And what we can ready to do is we can ready put these folks in captivity. That's what we can ready do. Hard bondage. Okay. And so people had become so comfortable, they became captives. I'm telling you right now, there's a difference between the kingdom and just religion. In religion, you can become comfortable with just going to Bible study, going to church, singing, doing praise and worship, whatever it is that the ritualistic part of what you consider in the relationship. But in the kingdom, no, you don't get comfortable because there's constant movement. There's a constant mandate to move. There's a constant movement. The Father's constantly adding something to us. We cannot just get stuck. I told you yesterday, it doesn't matter how many years I've been doing the feast days and how many years I've been honoring the Sabbath. The Father's doing something different every time. I can't just go back on and listen to my own stuff and say, I'm going to preach or I'm going to minister what I ministered last year. You know why? Because the Father wants to add to us. He wants to add to us now. So for me to go back to something else that I already declared, nothing for the reference of just remembering, great. We can remember what he's already declared, but now he wants to add to it, right? He wants to add to it. So he will definitely raise up enemies to contend with you. Okay. 1 Kings chapter 11, right? Verse 31, I believe it is 31b through 33. And then verse 38. I'm going to go to that really quickly because this is an important verse. I want to adhere to this because the Father brought it up and I want to read it to you because I want to show you the difference. Now, this is when Jeroboam was getting ready to come into power, right? Now, just a little backstory on Jeroboam. First of all, Jeroboam was Solomon's servant. Okay. He was Solomon's servant. Solomon lost his way. And so now a prophet finds Jeroboam along the way and he says, listen, the Father is getting ready. He rends the clothing that Jeroboam has on, new garment that he had on. He ripped it up into 12 pieces. He kept 2, but he gave 10 pieces to Jeroboam. And he says, take the 10 pieces. I'm going to read it to you. 1 Kings 11:31. I want you to remember that Jeroboam was in Solomon's house, but he was a servant. He was not his son. But the father was taking the kingdom to give it to a servant. That's a whole conversation in and of itself, okay? It says here in 1 Kings 11:31, it says, and he said to Jeroboam, this is Ahijah, the prophet, and he caught the new garment that was on him and rent it in 12 pieces. And he said, take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith Yah, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and I will give 10 tribes to you. But he shall have one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. Now, I want you to be aware of something, because I just shared with you that Jeroboam was one of the most wicked kings outside of Ahab. Ahab was after him. Ahab picked up his mantle and took it further. But Jeroboam knew where worship was supposed to happen in that time. It's stated right here that the prophet told him that that Solomon's going to retain one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, or Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. He knows that this is the city of God. Okay, but remember what he does. He not only changes diverts the attention to Bethel and Dan, he creates golden calves for them to worship. And then he opposes the very feasting times of Yah by creating outside of the 7th month and 8th month on the 15th day for the Feast of Tabernacles. Are you hearing this? Wow, right? Okay, so it says here, because this is where I want to get to. Because they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians. Now, I want you to remember that Ashtaroth, Esther, Easter, she has different names, but all of this is connected to Easter. So Easter is not a new thing. Okay, this is old. This is ancient false worship. Okay, this is ancient worship of false gods. They worshiped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon. Now, he's talking about the children of Israel. He's talking about the people that he delivered from captivity. This is where we are. Are you hearing me? Many of you that are listening, you've been delivered from all sorts of things. There are things that the Father has brought you out of, and despite the fact that you've been brought out, the fact that you've been delivered, you still have these golden calves. These, I call them, yeah, what do I use? They're golden calves, but sacred cows. That's what I call them. You still have these sacred cows? After all of the deliverance that's been brought to you, you still have audacity to have sacred cows? It says in Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in my eyes. Now, remember what I told you. There are things that are right in the Father's eyes that are not right in man's eyes. There are things that are right in his eyes that other people see as over the top, that other people see as a problem. I can tell you right now, when I first started talking about not celebrating the holidays that man created, Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving and all these things, when I first started talking about that, people were so irritated. It irritated the soul of people who say they are believers. It irritated because they were trying to get me to, and I was like, I don't celebrate the holidays anymore. And I wasn't like proud about it, or I don't know, y'all celebrating the holiday. It wasn't like that. I was just like, yeah, I don't adhere to those things anymore. I'm on a different path. I'm doing something else. And they just make it seem like you the whole devil. You know, like, who do you think you are? You know what I'm saying? That you don't celebrate this. This is something that, you know, we've been doing, and this is something that's been handed down and passed down. But guess what? Everything that's passed down is not what the Father deems as right in his eyes. Okay. He said, you have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in my eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgment, as did David, his father. They didn't do this. David did this, but he didn't do this. This is not what Solomon was doing. Okay. I want to jump down to verse 38. It says, and it shall be. This is what he told Jeroboam. Y'all can read that whole thing in your own time. It says, and it shall be if. Remember we was talking about the if-then theory the other day? This is one of those if-then. This is how the kingdom works. This is how life works, period. It's an if-then theory. It shall be if thou wilt hearken unto all that I command thee, and will walk in my ways and do that which is right in my sight. Now, he's a servant of Solomon. And guess what? Salvation happened long before what you guys consider the New Testament. It was happening long before that. The Father was talking about salvation, even when he was talking to the children of Israel, how they would receive the strangers. And if the stranger would adhere to following the principles and the statutes, then he would be considered as one of them. He would no longer be a stranger. It's being shown right here. This is a servant of Solomon. He's not even in the family of Israel, but he's a servant. And he says, it shall be, if thou wilt hearken unto all that I command thee, and will walk in my ways, and do that is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments, which means these things were revealed to him, which means these are things that he has heard and seen, right? As David my servant did, that I will be with thee and build thee a sure house, as I built for David, and will give Israel unto thee. Are you listening to this? Are you paying attention to what's being done here? This is what the Father's desire is that if we'll walk in his ways. I mean, we love the blessings of the Lord make rich and add no sorrow. We love Deuteronomy 28, talking about the blessings of the Lord, but we ignore the curse. And then we ignore the fact of what brings the curse is the fact that you don't adhere, that you're not obedient to the statutes, that you're not following whatever he's prescribed. You're on another prescription. You on synthetic drugs. And he's like, no, this is a natural thing. I put my law in your heart. Listen, you don't even have to go. Where's that the scripture that talks about it's not off in the heavens, that you got to send somebody to the heavens and say, here it is. It's not in the depths of the earth. It's nigh you, even in your mouth. He said, listen, I put it in your heart so it will be in your mouth. But we can hear the thing and ignore the thing based on where our heart is. Wherever our heart is, that's what we treasure. Wherever our heart is, that's what we're going to treasure. What is this time about? I'm blowing the trumpet for you. Today, I'm blowing the trumpet because this is Yom Teruah. It is the time of blast. It's the time of trumpets. It's a place of remembrance. It's a place of commemoration. I'm going to read to you some other things that he gave me to share with you. Okay. It says Leviticus Chapter 23. You know, that's where you'll find all of the feast days. These are things that he established. These are things that he ordained outside of the Sabbath. These are things that he ordained and that he desires to meet with us during these times. I gave you the meaning of Yom Teruah, meaning a day, Yom, a day, Teruah, of sounds, shouting and blasting. And it's so funny. It's a day of Sabbath, right? Because that's the very first thing that he said in Leviticus Chapter 23. He said, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing the trumpets, and a holy convocation. This is what he told Moshe to speak unto the children of Israel, saying in the 7th month. And I told you this is the 7th month. Yes, we understand that there are many calendars. We got the Gregorian calendar in this time of mankind, the Gregorian calendar, right? We live according to that for day-to-day operations. But as it pertains to spiritual things, in order for us to tap into what the Father is saying on any spiritual level, we have to adhere to his calendar. We're in the 7th month according to the calendar of Yah. And I know a lot of people want to be really smart and think that this is the head of the year, or what the Jews deem Rosh Hashanah and all of that. And so y'all deep into all of the Jewish ideologies of things. But I told you, you go from one extreme to the other. You go from the Christian extreme. You go from the Christian extreme to the Jewish extreme. And the Father said, all I want to do is kingdom. That's all I'm about. I'm not about these extremes. I'm not about these religions. I'm about the kingdom. I'm a king over a kingdom, not a king over religion. Are you listening to what I'm saying? So you're going from one extreme to the other. And if you read anything about Rosh Hashanah, the history of it, as you study it and all of that, I was really trying to make sense of it. I was really trying to make sense of it. But it opposes. It's a Jeroboam thing to me. It opposes everything that the Father is saying. It goes against what he's saying. And so guess what? I can't adhere. Not to mention that the first of months, according to Exodus, right, when the Father's having this conversation with Moshe about Passover, that's the first of months. He said, this shall be the first of months to you and throughout all generations. In other words, anybody that's coming into the covenant, anybody that is under the covenant governance, understands that the first month is where Passover happens. And that's where you count the months from. It's right. And so by the Gregorian calendar, we're in September, which I guess is the 9th month. I don't know. Yeah. 6 is June, July, August, September. 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 9th month. Yeah, but according to the Father's calendar, we're in the 7th month. And why is this important? Because the adversary seeks to change, or thinks to change times and laws. You'll find that in the book of Daniel, right? Why? Because if he can get you off of the times and the laws, then he'll get you out of fellowship. He'll get you out of relationship. And therefore, you won't be benefited. You won't benefit from the obedience, because the blessing is in your obedience. It's not in your rituals. It's in your obedience. You understand what I'm saying? So this is important. He said that Yom Teruah is a Sabbath, a Sabbaton. You know what Sabbath means? It means intermission. You remember I was telling you the other day, I was like, man, I feel like I'm missing something. Like it was something, alarm went off in me to bring my attention to what was getting ready to take place. But it was an intermission. The Sabbath every week is an intermission for sons. You know how intermission happens, right? You got this play or whatever is going on, or this show going on, or whatever is happening. But then there's an intermission, meaning a break. A time for you to gather yourself. You're going to get refreshed, right? Go to the bathroom. It's just things you do in the intermission. You get refreshed. You take care of yourself. You do the things, and then you get back in your seat to continue whatever is before you, right? And this is what the Father's desire has always been about the Sabbath. I want you to take an intermission in the week so that you can be refreshed, so that you can get back to things from a different perspective, and you're not just blown. You're not just, what's the word? Burnt out. You're not burnt out. If you got a 3-hour show, you can't sit for 3 hours. At that hour and a half, you got to take a break. Then you can come back. Stretch your legs. Intermission, right? He said it's a day of commemoration or memorial, remembrance, a reminder, a record of proof, right? And then it's a set apart, which is what holy means, a set apart convocation. What is the convocation? The announcement of an assemblage, a coming together of sons per Yah's order. I know, people like to have holy convocations, but guess what? Once again, that's man making up their own thing, because convocation only happens when Yah calls it. But somehow in these denominations, people think they can call a holy convocation. And I'm like, how? What are we doing? What are we doing? It's a divine order. It's not something that man calls. It's something that Yah calls. And these convocations are connected to the Sabbaths and to the appointed times, or what he calls the Moedim, the appointed times of Yah, right? You'll find that in Leviticus, okay? So let's look at Mount Sinai for a minute, because when I think about the trumpets, when I think about these sounds, there's a lot of things that come to mind. The Exodus is one of them, right? The establishment of covenant is preceded by the sound of trumpets, voicings, thunders, lightnings, right? The sounds and the blast. This is what happens in the midst of sounds and blasts is covenant. Covenant happens there, all right? And you'll find the same thing happening in Acts, where these voices became as a trumpet. It's the same thing in Exodus. He says voicings and trumpets, right? The voices of trumpets, okay? But then in Acts, the same thing happens again, right? Because now the people have embodied the voice of the trumpet, and now they're falling out into the streets and they're declaring the message of Yah. They're declaring the good message of Yah to people that don't even speak. They don't even speak their language, but somehow they're able to voice the good message of Yah to these people. The blowing of trumpets was accompanied by shouts, okay? All throughout scripture, even when we get to Revelations, you see, and the voice of the archangel with the shout. At the last trump, there's a shout, right? All of these things require voice. Even when you're blowing a trumpet, it requires breath, right? But beyond that, there's something that has to be stated. There's something that has to be said. The blowing of trumpets is accompanied by shouts. We see that in Jericho, in Jericho's defeat, right? There's a trumpet blast, and then there's a shout, and then there is a defeat of an enemy, right? This sound, this distinction of sounds, these sounds are rehearsals for a big event. Why does the Father want us to meet him at these appointed times? Because these are rehearsals. And yes, there's a conversation about the Mashiach having fulfilled a bunch of these appointed times. He's the fulfillment. But the purpose of him fulfilling was so that you would see that you could be fulfillment. His purpose was to show you a way. So if he was the way, then we need to follow the way. And you can't say, oh, well, we don't follow feasts anymore, because if you say you follow him, he followed the feast, right? So you can't just say, oh, well, I don't follow the feast because that's too deep or that's too much. But you follow Christmas and you call that Christ Mass. You say, oh, the reason for the season and all of that. No, it has nothing to do with that. Absolutely zero to do with that. Absolutely zero. That's a whole nother situation. But, I've been tooting that horn for a long time. I've been blowing that horn for a long time. And I promise you, I'll probably hit on Easter today, but I'm not going to hit on the whole thing because we don't have the time. I wanted to be done before sundown, but we're coming in to sundown now. And I just wanted to share this time with you. Distinctive sounds. At the last trump, the sound, the blast, Yah shall descend with a shout, right? And we know in the dead in Christ shall rise first, right? And we which are alive and remain. That means some of us are going to still be here, right? Okay, so we've seen the rehearsal of sound to announce big events all along. We remember Noah declaring and shouting He was the voice. He was the trumpet. He was the sound in his generation to sound the alarm, right? For the big event, for the flood. Nobody believed him. It's the same thing now. I'm saying to you guys, this is not the way. You got to come out of her. You got to leave it alone. This is what the word says. These are not Kristal's words. These are not Apostle Kristal's prescribed methods. These are the Father's prescribed methods. He says, you got to leave it alone. You've got to let it go. Okay? And people are saying, no, I can't let it go. We've been doing this all of this time, right? So these sounds that the Father desires to release from the sons are about announcement of special events. Why a lot of people are not going to be ready for the trump of Yah. They're not going to be ready for that because they haven't practiced it. They haven't rehearsed it, right? They have not rehearsed the trump. So when it sounds, they won't even know what's going on. They'll be like, what is that? What is this noise? What is this sound? Right? They'll be so unsure because they've not been in the rehearsals to know what the script is, right? So Noah sounded the alarm as a trump of Yah for 120 years to a people who refused to hear him. And they continued in their lives and their styles of living till the day of their utter destruction. It's going to be a lot of people who will say in that day, Father, but I did this. Or, Lord, I did this and I did that. And he's going to say, I don't know you. Listen, we were not in relationship. You were in religion and you name drop, but you were not in relationship, embodying who I am, right? Trumpets sound to declare order. What is the purpose of a trumpet? To declare order. The times that trumpets would sound in the camp of Israel, it was, based on how long the trumpet sounded or how many blasts. Sometimes it was to call the elders of the assemblies together, right, for a meeting. And then a longer blast, they understood that was a time of formation of the armies for war, right? But it calls things to order and separation. The ark's contents created on Mount Sinai was preceded by blasts. You remember the Ark of the Covenant? You remember the tablets that was in the ark? The ark contained things that were created on Mount Sinai. And in that moment, there were sounds, there were blasts, there were trumpets, right? And in that time, when we're talking about the trumpets declaring order, because there are blasts, there are sounds, there are trumpets, there are voicings. And in that time, the Father sends Moshe down to make sure the people are following the orders not to approach the mountain or to break through and see, right? Order. The sound of the trumpet was for order. So even though Moshe was caught up and he was excited about, in this environment, being in this environment and being in this dimension, the Father says, listen, go down there and bring order, because this is what the trumpet is about. The trumpet is about order and separation. When we look in 1 Kings chapter 8, 9b through 11, Solomon builds the temple and sets the ark in its proper place. This same ark that at that time only contained the tablets. There was nothing else in it. He put that ark of the covenant in its proper place, okay, in the temple. And your body is the temple, right, of the Holy Ghost. This is the place that the Father dwells by his Spirit. And he said, I've written my laws on the table of your heart, right? Okay, so I just want you to see it like it is. It says here that Solomon puts the ark in its proper place in the temple. It is in this environment that the glory of Yah reveals itself. 1 Kings 8, 9b through 11. Listen to this. It says, there at Horeb, when Yah made a covenant with the children of Israel, when they came out of the land of Egypt, and it came to pass when the priests were come out of the holy place, that the cloud filled the house of Yah, so that the priest could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory, the doings of Yah had filled the house, had filled his house. Why? Because Solomon understood to put the ark in its proper place, in its proper environment. And what's in the ark? The covenant. We've got to put covenant in its proper place. We've got to put it in its rightful place. Let me tell you something else that happens in trumps. And we've kind of talked about this already. What else happens in the trumpet sound is ascension. We talked about the Revelation version of that, but I want you to remember Exodus chapter 19, where the Father is talking to Moshe and calling him to the mount. When he calls him to the mount, it says that the Father's on the mount and he calls Moshe and he comes up. That word come up doesn't just mean that he climbed the mountain. It means that he was supernaturally lifted into a position. I want you to understand that these times, these appointed times, are for the purpose of the Father giving us what we need so that we can ascend, so that we will be in the presence of Yah, so that we will be able to hear and adhere to what the Father is saying. We ascend when we obey. This is an environment and a dimension of ascension. Obedience is a dimension of ascension. Obeying these times and these appointments are places of ascension. I have said this over and over again, and I never get tired of saying it, that when I came into the dimension of identifying with the Sabbath and the feast days, I ascended. As a son, I ascended, not just as a leader, but as a son, as a child, as an inheritor. I ascended. You know, it's for this purpose, the sound of the trumpet, and not adhering to these times, such as Yom Teruah, the blowing of trumpets, the sounding. Many are going to be caught off guard at the coming of the Mashiach, but they have not been to any of the rehearsals to know what's in the script. They've been rehearsing their own religious rituals and rites to be approved of men, and thereby approving men who do the same. And in doing so, they have ignored the law of Yah while claiming affiliation by dropping a name. You dropping names doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter whether you know the authentic names of the Father or you call him by something else. If you don't adhere, then you're not connected. If you don't adhere, then you're not fully connected. There's a fullness of relationship. I was talking about this yesterday, where, okay, so now we're betrothed to be married or engaged, right? But after engagement, then comes the covenant, and the covenant is signified by the connection, right? So for many years, we were engaged to be married or betrothed. We were engaged. We were betrothed to God, right? We were betrothed to Yah, but we had not yet come into the marriage, because the marriage denotes some things. The marriage denotes connection. So there are a lot of people still being betrothed to Yah, still in engagement, but they haven't yet come into the marriage because they've refused. They think that, these times are too much, right? The sound of the trumpet, the shout, is connected to deliverance. The sound of the trumpet, the shout, is is connected to deliverance, which is connected to obedience. Because you remember the master would say, go and sin no more. He bring deliverance and he say, go and sin no more. That's connected to obedience, right? The following of the statutes of Yah, which is connected to the right relationship with mankind and Yah. Now, when I say right relationship, that don't mean everybody going to agree with you. That don't mean everybody going to want to hear what you have to say. No, but you're in right standing because you're in right relationship with the Father. Therefore, your relationship with mankind follows the protocol. Love the Father with all your heart, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as you love yourself. So that means you got to love yourself. And how you love you, right? You should love everybody else. So there are people you're going to give a chance because you would give yourself a chance, right? You got to give people opportunity because you would give yourself opportunity, right? So here are the dates for the seasons of appointments of this time that we're in, the fall festivals. October 2nd and 3rd, which is what we're in right now. I'm sorry, September 24th and 25th. We're in Yom Teruah. It was only a day from even to even. October 2nd to 3rd, because it goes from even to even. The 3rd is actually the Day of Atonement, but it begins at even on the 2nd and ends at even on the 3rd, right? That's the 10th day of the month. You'll find it in Leviticus Chapter 23, verse 27. On the 10th day of the month, the Day of Atonement is what's supposed to happen, okay? October 8th through the 15th, all right? The 15th day of the month is when the Feast of Tabernacles begins, and it proceeds for 7 days, and then there's an 8th day, which is a Sabbath, okay? You'll find it in Leviticus Chapter 23, verse 34. So what the Father's desire is in this season is for us to come out, right? Come out of her, my people. You've heard that over and over again. Well, what does that mean to you? Come out of her, my people. Don't serve me like they serve their gods. In other words, you can't do what they do the way that they do and then call it service to me. The question that I asked yesterday, I ask again. If while you are doing what you're doing, where in it is Yah's worship? Because it is a form of worship. And I put it simply yesterday, but I needed to clarify that it is a form of worship. But the question is, what are you worshiping and whom are you worshiping? Right? So let's quickly go over the gods of the holiday, Easter. That's the only one I'm doing today. Okay? I'm only doing that one. And then we're going to get out of here. We're going to get out of here. Let me see if you guys are what you guys are saying. I'm sorry I didn't put any of you guys' comments up today, but it's okay. All right. I appreciate you. Blessings to you, Little Morning Dew. My baby girl is on. Hi, baby. I love you. Blessings to you, Minister Davis. I see you. Okay, so let's just go over this Easter piece for a hot second, because this is a matter of fact. And matter of fact, I will post the link, because this is a matter of fact. I mean, like, these things are not things that are hidden anymore. The adversary does what he does in plain sight. So I'm just going to post this link so you can go and read it yourself. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to give you enough of it so you can go and start doing your research. Okay? You go ahead and start doing your research. I'm going to put it in this room here too. I'll put it in this room as well so that people can see that and go to it. All you're going to do is type in the history of Easter or something like that, but you could potentially click that link or copy the link, I guess. If it's in a transcript, you can copy the link on YouTube and you can go to it. But anywho, let's go to this real quick, because this is a matter of record. It's not like these things are hidden. We literally are in an age of information, and these things are clear. These things are clear, okay? Very clear. There are a lot of things that Easter is, and there are a lot of things that Easter is not. And so it goes into all of the things that it is, right? But I want to start here. Easter, Ishtar, or Ashtaroth, which means goddess of fertility. So what god are you serving when you celebrate Easter? You're not celebrating Yah. And see, there's where a lot of things get twisted as well, because we think we're supposed to be serving the Mashiach when he brought things to our attention that we might serve Yah. He never said serve me. That's not, it says that he didn't come to be served, but to serve. So, there's some simple truths that we got to lay hold to in this season in order to bring us to a place of deliverance. Because if you're thinking that during this time, you're celebrating, blessings to you, Little Morning Dew. If you think that you're celebrating him during Easter, right, when it's clear that this is a pagan holiday, it's theirs, and the goddess of fertility, which is Easter, Ishtar, Ashtaroth, she goes by many different names, but she is the goddess of fertility, okay? And when that's been a part of your life for a long time, and you've been doing the different rituals of that, it can be difficult if you don't have it set in your heart, okay? If you don't, you'll adhere to the Good Friday, which of course Negroes can't count because they never align the 3 days. It's never right. And then they wonder why people despise church and despise religion, because folks are uneducated. Okay, there's ignorance. All right, you cannot justify between Friday and Sunday 3 days. So can we just cut it out? But you're going to follow this pattern that was prescribed by man in order to do what? It's full of fun and frolic. Okay, and it's a problem. Okay. Now, you got Easter egg hunts, and churches are still doing Easter egg hunts. And do you even understand what you're doing when you do an Easter egg hunt? Do you understand the rites and the rituals of Easter? The cakes and buns. I talked about the hot cross buns, right? Baked to the Queen of Heaven. That's in Jeremiah. The eating of ham. That's Tammuz, which is the son of the sun god, was killed by a pig in order to bring him back to life. No eat was meat, so it's eaten for 40 days, and that's where Lent comes from. But at Easter Sunday, a pig was killed and eaten. Why is the pig killed? Because the pig killed Tammuz. My tongue got completely twisted. The pig killed Tammuz. So this is where we get Lent from, the 40 days of Lent. I know people just celebrate anything. Just because it sounds right doesn't make it right, right? So they killed a pig in revenge, right? So fish eaten on Good Friday. The fish symbol also represents the goddess of fertility and is considered as a woman's vulva, the creator of life. The eating of fish on Fridays was a sacrament to the goddess, also called Dagon. And you've seen Dagon before. She's got a fish head. And then you've also seen that symbol of the fish connected to Christianity. Okay, so virgin sex. As the cult of Ishtar developed, the priest would take and impregnate young virgins on the altar of the goddess of fertility at sunrise on Easter Sunday. Okay, so here's where the eggs come into play, because the eggs represent, see, now they got all kind of colors because that was to cover up. But before, they just were dipped in red. So after a year of impregnation, the priest of Easter would sacrifice these 3-month-old babies on the altar at the front of the sanctuary. That is the whole dyed the Easter eggs in blood of the sacrificed infants, okay? As eggs were great examples of the embodiment of fertility and life, okay? So you got to understand these things are a lot deeper than what, people are putting on or letting on. And if you don't study for yourself, if you don't study to show yourself approved, if you don't get out of religion and get into relationship, you're going to miss some things that are going to be things that you should not miss. You're going to miss what the Father is doing in this season. And why live this long in this generation and miss everything that he's doing? And miss everything that he's doing with his sons. And forfeit the promise, forfeit the blessing of Yah that makes rich, forfeit everything that he desires for you, trying to keep up with the traditions of man. The question was in the post, like, so all he's asking for is your time and your attention, that you adhere to these things, that you put yourself in a position to hear what he's saying and fulfill what he's speaking to you. But you would rather trade that for people that want to just collect your money, because all these holidays cost money. I mean, I'm talking about if you're doing Easter, you buy Easter clothes, you buy Easter baskets, all of these things cost money, right? If you're doing Christmas, you got a tree, you got decorations, you can put yourself in debt for gifts that people don't even care about. They're not even going to be paying attention to, right? Particularly children, grown-ups too. But you done went out of your way to buy stuff for people you don't even like. I mean, come on. What are we really doing here? Are you willing to trade this time of fellowship with Yah to go into new dimensions and to exude his glory in the earth for temporary feelings of pleasure and looking good? Is that what we're doing? We got to do better, because there's some things that the Father is concerned about. So listen, I'm going to turn you guys loose. I got a lot more I would want to say, but I think we have served the purpose here. The Day of Atonement is going to be powerful. I told you the Day of Atonement is, I believe, the 8th at even to the 9th at even. And we're going to talk about the Son's passage from death to life and the power that's in the living sacrifice. And we're going to get over into this 7-eyed, 7-horned lamb on the Day of Atonement. Okay? But it's going to be an exciting time. And I want you to prepare yourself to fast that entire day from even to even. No food, no water. Fast. So brush your teeth the night before, but we're not putting nothing in our mouth on the Day of Atonement. Just get somewhere and sit down. It's supposed to be a Sabbath anyway, right? Get somewhere and sit down and just be available to hear. Be available to hear what the Father desires to say. Be available for the download. You understand what I'm saying? It's an exciting time. We are in an exciting time, and the Father is doing great and mighty things. I believe the other day I saw rivers in the desert, and we know that's what the word of Yah says. I guess that was the Sahara Desert that somebody captured, rivers springing up and flowing. Listen, this is not a time to play. This is not a time not to adhere. You need to not only hear, but adhere to whatever the Father is saying. Please, I am imploring you. Don't take it lightly in this season. Don't be as the people were in Noah's day, where, and the Father said this through many of the prophets. He said, I sent you prophets day and night before these things came to pass. I sent you prophets. Y'all killed the prophets. You rejected what I said. You know what I mean? And don't be as the children of Israel. I used to say that to my children. It was a whole year. I just kept saying them, don't be like the children of Israel. It was an edict. It was a verdict. And it was a declaration that the Father wanted to give to them for another season of their life. Don't be like the children of Israel and not adhere to what the Father is saying. Understand that your purpose for wilderness, moving through the wilderness, is not for a burial place. It's for a place of burying what you were to become what he's calling you to. You got to be prepared for what he's calling you to. A lot of people want $1 million, but they don't even know what to do with $1 million. We don't even have lists yet. We don't even have anything written out that we would do with that money, but we want $1 million though. We want that. We want, to have all of these different things, but we don't begin to know what to do with it. Matter of fact, so many people, I'm looking at people right now in this season particularly. I mean, this happened in other seasons, but this is really prevalent, that people have all these things, but they don't understand that the things that the Father's given them are not just for them. They're for them to share. And so a lot of people they're not going to be receiving in the seasons ahead of us. People that have been the haves are going to be the have-nots because they have not understood the law. They have not understood the way of Yah. And they have thought that these things were for them. They didn't the Father couldn't get nothing through them to anybody else because they just simply thought that the position that they were in, where they had arrived, was simply for them and for nobody else. Yeah, but that's not the case because that's not how the kingdom works. It's not how the kingdom works. So I love you guys. I appreciate you being on with me on this Day of Atonement. And I'm sorry, during Yom Kippur, Yom Teruah. See, I told you, no matter how long I've been doing this, I still, particularly the last few feast days or the last few days, I usually get them crossed up. But the cross up comes from all of the extra conversations like Rosh Hashanah and all of that, all the extra conversations is what convolute what the Father is doing. But it's okay. Just get back on track. We're in Yom Teruah. Okay. The preparation for the Day of Atonement. And after the Day of Atonement will be the Feast of Tabernacles, or what we call Sukkot, right? So I'm excited that you were here with me for Yom Teruah. And I pray that you were blessed by what you heard. I pray that it ignites you to seek him deeper, because it's something in the depth of relationship that you just can't get on the surface. Bless you, little morning dew. You can't certain things you can't get on the surface. The intimacy you can't get on the surface. It's depths that cause intimacy to be realized, And I'll see you on the other side on the 8th and 9th for the Day of Atonement. And on, what days did I give you? I'll look at it one more time. I'll mention it one more time before we get off. And matter of fact, I'll put it in the room. The dates for the seasons of appointment. So October 2nd and 3rd is the 10th day of the 7th month, and that's the Day of Atonement. And October 8th through the 15th the Feast of Tabernacles begins on the 15th day. Okay. And that is the 8th through the 15th of October. That's 7 days plus 1, which is the Sabbath, which is an 8th day. So I'm going to put that in the room for you guys. And yeah, I'll put that in the room. I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I'll see you again real soon. Listen, the body is not a me thing. It's a we thing. And we're going to go together in this season. We're going to do what the Father is declaring that should be done as one unit. We're going to begin to rise and follow the instructions so that we can rise to, I love you more, to realize the blessing of God. All right. Peace to your house. I'll talk real soon. Until the next time.